Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, and you're listening to Incredible Life Creator Podcast. My guest today is Grace Sammon. Grace Sammon grew up on Long Island, New York, and moved to Washington, D.C. to attend college. She has degrees in drama, psychology, and education. Her work life started out in higher education, and then she worked in a travel agency, started 2 educational nonprofit corporations, and then for nearly 30 years, Grace owned an educational consulting firm that focused on high school improvement, and she was lucky enough to travel and work in 32 states and on tribal lands. That work generated 3 books and numerous articles. The biggest joy of her life is the gift of her 2 children, now amazing adults. Grace retired, in quotation marks, at the age of 59 to marry her husband and best friend. Her new novel, The Eves, apparently was not done. Grace is about to embark on a new phase of fulfillment, even in a pandemic and at the age of 67, 66 in 10 months. It's scary and exciting and sometimes exhausting to continue to create an incredible life. Welcome to the podcast, Grace.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me, Kimberly.
Yes. So you've had quite a journey. So why don't you start out by telling us where you grew up and your story?
Well, a lot of what you read in the introduction certainly captures it. I started out in Long Island. I was really lucky. I had that very sort of 50s Leave It to Beaver family. It was really a great experience. My dad was a television director. He did a very famous television show by Edward R. Murrow at the time. So we were always surrounded by really exciting things. So I thought I would go into television broadcasting myself, but that didn't really happen. My mom was very much a product of, her generation. So she thought I should be home, having dinner on the table for husband and kids. So I took a different path. I went to school in Washington, D.C. and spent decades there. It's such a wonderful place to work, grow up. I raised my 2 children there. And I thought I would have a wonderful life in higher education. And as things happen, things happen. So I got fired from my job. I thought I was absolutely going to do nothing. My husband at the time decided that was a good time for a divorce. So I was a single mom with 2 kids and no job. So it was about creating who I needed to be. And I answered a tiny little ad in the Washington Post back when you would get the classified ads and go down. There was a little 2-line ad that said, educational consultant wanted. And I had no idea what that meant. Mm-hmm. So I kind of played my way into that. And what was super important to me then was not only that I could create myself, but I had a great girlfriend who said, that's just not going to do it for you. So you need to come work in the travel agency with me for a while. I knew nothing about travel either, but it was the importance of girlfriends and having somebody else to reach out. So life has had many twists and turns. I started that little educational consulting firm, and then through that, more and more work came my way. My brother always says, the harder you work, the luckier you get, So people think a lot of it is luck, but a lot of it is really work. Yeah. So after that, I started another educational consulting firm. And my business partner at the time said, you should write a book about this. And I was like, I don't have anything to say. And then there was a book, and then there were speaking tours. And that was a wonderful journey, because to travel in 32 states around this country and on tribal lands gives you a very, very different perspective. There was an old New Yorker cartoon where there's all of the East Coast and then nothing. And I had that myopic view. And, in your professional work as an optometrist, it's really so much of how we look at the world really that changes our perspective. Mm-hmm. And to have the various perspectives of what it's like to be on tribal lands, or most of my work was in inner city schools. Mm-hmm. And that whole perspective of being marginalized or not having resources gives me, especially now, and you can hear it in the discussions we're having as a nation now, I was definitely had a very, very privileged upbringing. So then all of a sudden I got to marry my best friend, and I had this book though that just had to be written. And so we're launching the Eves in the middle of a pandemic.
Uh-huh.
Long answer.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So what are some of the things you learned, like being on, the lands you were on and in these schools that you didn't know before?
Oh, so much. It's funny. I had a friend at the time who said, there's that old adage, those that can teach, those that can do, those that can't teach, those who can't do either become educational consultants.
Oh, no.
So I actually learned an awful lot. My area of expertise was high schools and creating smaller learning communities within these vast high schools. We have high schools across the country that have 5,000, 6,000 kids in them. So what we found out was the importance of creating these smaller learning communities within the large high schools so kids didn't get lost. And we saw an amazing turnaround in Anacostia High School, which is a wonderful learning ground for me. It was one of the first places I worked. And because of my love for Anacostia, there's a lot of that in my book, The Eves. But in that high school, we had a 19% graduation rate. And 4 years later, we had a 95% graduation rate.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, really amazing. But was also so important to me was we didn't bury the amount of Black boys that we had buried previously. Gang violence went down. Teenage pregnancy went down. People just cared for each other more.
Oh, that is so wonderful.
So that was a real eye-opener. And I was a single mom at the time, so frequently I had to bring my kids to the after-school teacher things. And I'm really glad that they were able to have that experience, because my neighbors would say, oh, how can you go to that part of town? And that part of town was wonderful, and to have my kids hear that conversation and realize that people are perceived differently. Mm-hmm. So that was a big eye-opener. And then when I worked on Native American lands, I was still called to do the same kind of work of bringing these large high schools into smaller learning communities. And what was amazing to me there was the high schools were only 400 kids, but on the Bureau of Indian Affairs sites, that felt like a very big high school, 400 kids. Mm-hmm. So just the different perspectives, different food, different travel. It was a good run.
Beautiful. It's just wonderful what you were doing. I hope those programs are continuing.
Well, it's interesting. One of the books I wrote was Creating and Sustaining Small Learning Communities. And that was a big federal initiative at one point. And the federal initiative didn't continue. But now, as we're in a pandemic and we're talking about what will schools look like, that book is beginning to sell again, because I think that what will happen is we can't go back to these large schools, at least right now, in my opinion. So we'll be looking at how to create these smaller schools. Cohort scheduling is what some people call them, or a middle school model. Mm-hmm. So we'll see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think I've thought that the schools really need a remodel. It's just not working with today's environment right now, and with today's job market, and different classes need to be taught.
I think that there will be a huge shift now. I've been talking to a lot of my educational consultant friends and my educator friends, mm-hmm. and there's just no easy answer on this one, mm-hmm. from so many aspects, whether families are going to have kids at home, various, people who have different resources at home, different skill sets. It's going to be a huge challenge.
Yes, it really, really is. Yeah. So, now, so you changed jobs several times, but then, and you were also single for quite a while.
I was.
Is that because you were raising your children, or?
I got divorced on my 35th birthday, mm-hmm. and it was a very odd birthday. Luckily, I was still good friends with my now ex-husband, and I remember the two of us went out to lunch and went, that's a really weird thing. But I got divorced on my 35th birthday, and I got married just before right after I turned 59. So a really long time. Part of it was I was traveling 200 days a year for about 8 years. So, and luckily my kids were older then. So that's not a good breeding ground for relationships at all. I'm also I don't want to ever use the word victim, but I also experienced sexual abuse as a young child. So I was 12 years old, and I was really hesitant to bring a man into my family. So, I didn't do that. But I'm really, really lucky now that I'm married to such a nice man.
Yes. Congratulations on that.
I think a couple of things are really wonderful about that. I think that I certainly learned to do everything myself and build a skill set that I didn't have to develop if I was in a good partnership. And, so I learned how to be alone and strong. But then I also realized at this point in my life what a delight it is to have a great partner. Mm-hmm. It's not always easy because I still think I can do everything, which isn't a good trait.
Of course. And, I'm sure people get set in their ways and the way they like things, just even within your home or in all sorts of categories. So
absolutely,
learning to live together would be very different.
Mm-hmm.
So you talked somewhat about, your girlfriends or having good girlfriends. So that time, when you were single, how did you develop those friendships that kind of help sustain you?
That's a great question, because one of the things I look at in my life now is I really have the best girlfriends of my life. Because when I was traveling, when I was a single parent, I didn't have the time. I was building 2 different companies, and I had 2 small children. My kids were 3 and 6 when I got divorced. So I had to build a business. I had to raise my kids. And although there were a great networks of moms on my street, one of the best things of luck I ever did was when we bought our house, we bought on a cul-de-sac with all brand new homes. So everybody moved in at the same time. There were no preconceived friendships. Everybody wanted to be in and out of each other's homes saying, where are you putting the couch? So we had this instant network of moms. And I couldn't have done it without the other moms on the block, because up north, we have things called snow days, where snow days can be school is entirely closed, or it opens an hour late, or it opens 2 hours late. Sometimes you don't know. So if it wasn't for the other moms on the block, I couldn't have done anything that I did. And now, though, with the leisure of retirement, if you will, I just have this vast network of friends. And it's really interesting. I'm a pretty data-driven person. And the data is clear that men do better married, women do better with girlfriends. Not that we don't do well if we're married, but in terms of happiness and support systems as we age, men do better if they're married, women do better with girlfriends. And I think it's because we speak a different language often, right?
Yes, exactly. So as people are getting into their later years, and some people do find themselves single either through divorce or death, a partner died. What is your best advice on how to actually go out and find friends and create deep friendships? Because, I know I'm involved in a lot of business networking, things like that.
Yeah.
And some of the people I get close to, but most of the people, we just know each other through business. We don't really know each other.
Mm-hmm. I think that's really a gift of getting older. As you age, or at least as I age, I think we know what we want more. I don't have the patience for being around negative people. I don't have the patience for a lot of superficiality. I can do the cocktail party, coffee clutch. I can do all of that. And I can find that even rich and rewarding. Mm-hmm. But really what I want to know is you. I want to know about you. And I want you to know about me so that I don't have to tell you my whole story all over again. We all have those people in our life where, you can pick up the phone, you haven't talked to them in 2 months, 2 years, whatever, and they get you. But I think it's really, really important to figure out at your core who you are. And part of that is the gift of age. You've already made bunches of mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you get that vibe when you see the cell phone, you go, oh no, it's her on the phone. You know, or thank God I got to leave a voice message. You know, I called her back, but I got to leave a voice message. Oh no, now people are going to be watching this podcast and go, is that how she feels? No, it's not. But no, I think that we have to listen to ourselves. I like the idea of disrupting the impossible. You know, who do you want to be and who do you need in your life? Disrupt that idea that you can't have friends or you can't write a book or you can't launch a book during a pandemic. You know, yes, you can launch a book during a pandemic. But the idea of girlfriends, getting back to your question, is really important. One of the interesting things in the book that I wrote, and I didn't know this was going to happen, basically Jessica in the book is a very messed up 60-ish woman who's let go of her ambition. She's let go of her looks. She really thinks she's what I call done. She's just given up on all of it. And a lot of it is because she's totally lost her foundation for being, which is her children. So as we age, we lose those roles, right? And as you mentioned, it might be through death, it might be through divorce, it could be through drifting away, it could be lots of things. But those of us who have had the roles of worker, mother, spouse, mother, child, all of those things, those roles fall away as you age. And it allows you, I think, to be your authentic self, which is the best thing any of us could be. Some people learn it way before I learned it. But that for me was the gift. So in my novel, Jessica is very, very lost, and she gets to be surrounded by these ditzy, determined, and very diverse women who have decided to live their life together instead of in a nursing home someplace or aging in isolation. They come together and they live at a place called the Eaves. And they're very committed to leaving their mark on the land. And there's a wonderful ceremony in the book where people dip their hands in paint and they leave their mark on the barn walls. And it's really, it happens at several different places for different people. And Jessica does not do it at the very beginning. And her girlfriend says, Jessica, you are hiding. Enough of this. It is time that you write about this place. And that's the story, is how she engages with these women. And when their stories are told, everything changes. And I was lucky enough to have my book club do a beta version of the book and respond to it. And that's what you see behind me. My book club took a quote from the book and they each dipped their hands in paint. And then my friend Marilyn Kessler made this amazing quilt for me.
Yes, it's beautiful. So
thank you.
Yes. And, you know, I think as a young mom, I was also a single parent pretty early on. And I would have loved to have known the three women at the Eaves, you know, because there's so much you go through, so much you don't understand. And you learn by making so many mistakes. And I thought, yeah, there was just those older, wise women around. And there were some in my life, you know, my mom and some different people, but I thought, well, that would be just like an ideal setup for someone who was lost. And your main character, Jessica, was actually older. She wasn't even beginning life. She was older and lost. So, you know, and there are lots of people like that. They actually get to that age, 60 or above, and they're still lost, or they still haven't matured. And other people look at it and go, what happened? Somewhere along the way, what happened?
Well, I always say I want to be my children when I grow up because they got it earlier.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think we do, you know, you asked me a question in our pre-interview about where there's, you know, moments in life that, you know, you really cherished. And I think we have to kind of segment those. You know, if I look at my almost 70 years, you know, that's 7 decades. What I value now is not what I valued, you know, growing up. You know, I would say absolutely one of my best times was raising my children. But I have to admit, that was like a 20-year span out of 67. And although I would like to say I'm still very involved in their lives and my grandchildren's lives, you know, that role of mother, teacher, it's very, very different now. So whether we get lost along the way, it's whether we get found.
Yeah, great point. Yes.
Good to get found.
I think the sooner we get found, the better we feel sooner.
Yes, I think that's really good. We can create our magic life that way.
We certainly can. So, tell me a little bit more about the book. Who would be a reader of your book?
Well, the youngest character is 15, and the oldest character is about 94. I think the real market, if you will, for the book is probably men and women 50 and above who are saying, how do we want to live out the rest of our lives? A key message is very much, we are not done. We always have to reinvent ourselves. And so I think anybody who's aging, certainly, and I think the other key message for me is the importance of relationships. It's a very character-driven novel. Each of the women has a very, very strong voice. The other thing is I think it's incredibly timely, and I didn't know this because and you're an author, and I loved what you said about, you know, you missed your deadline for your book twice, and then you had a life event, a very hard life event that said, this is now the time to write this book. Well, I finished The Eves mostly 2 years ago and went through a whole process. We can talk about the process of publishing, which is a remarkable one. So I went through a whole process of that, feeling very much like a failure. I'm not getting The Eves out the door. It needs to be out there. This is the perfect time, even in a pandemic. I'm convinced of it, because there's very strong African-American characters. There's strong Latinx characters. There's the lesbian couple. The book talks about Juneteenth. I wrote about Juneteenth 2-3 years ago, and I would say 90% of the audience would not have known what Juneteenth was. Now I would say there's probably not a lot of people who have not heard about Juneteenth. So I think the diversity of the book, the subject matter of the book. The other thing that when I wrote it, I'm a big NPR listener. And when I wrote it for that kind of curious mind. So whether you're an NPR listener or not may not matter. But you love like fun factoids like Juneteenth. For me, that was a great little research project. I liked, that came to mind when I was doing research for something else, because we talk about quilting in the book. And during the quilting research, I found out about Juneteenth. One of the characters has cancer in the book, and there's a recommendation that they inject polio cells into her brain. And that's actually a real treatment. So I think the other person who would like the book is that person who's just a really curious reader. We also go to 3 different continents. We go to Africa, and I had a wonderful time in Africa at the site where Mary Leakey found the footprints of where we really first stood erect as human beings. And we go to Norway, and then the beautiful Maryland countryside, and a lot in DC where I grew up. Well, I raised my kids.
Beautiful. Yeah, I can't wait to read it.
I can't wait to hear how you like it.
I know, I'm gonna just love it. So, so in your book, you talk about relationships between parents, children, grandchildren. Talk a little bit more about that.
Well, you hit on it when you talked about needing or wanting the benefit of older women. I always talk about them as other mothers. I have continued to find it's so important to have these other mothers in my life. And I didn't know that. My mom died 20 years ago, and her death scene is actually captured in the book as one of the characters' mom's death scene. And I had the real privilege of helping my mom pass. She had bone cancer, horribly painful disease. And I took some time off and helped her transition. And she and my dad were just a beautiful, beautiful couple. And when I was doing that. I remember walking one day in Maryland. My parents were in New York, and I was home, and I was walking along this beautiful bike path, and I was sobbing. And this woman walked by me. And then the next day I was walking and I was sobbing, and she walked by me. And on the third day, she said, "What's the matter for you?" This is a wonderful Italian lady. She goes, "What's the matter for you? I see you crying. What's the matter for you?" So she and I, her name's Dolores, and she's the prototype. She's the prototype for Elizabeth in my book. And she was 70 years old at the time, which I thought was ancient. She just turned 90. I'm so blessed to still have her in my life. And I was telling my mom about Dolores and how I'm really happy I'm meeting this nice Italian lady friend, because my mom was Italian. And my mother took my hand on her deathbed and said, "She's not an Italian lady friend. She's an angel put on earth to take care of you after I die."
Aww.
And here I still have Dolores 20 years later. And she's in Maryland, and she and I still talk. But she's not going to be here forever. So I have it like, this sounds horrible. I've met this other lady who's like 86, and she's taking me under her wing. And I'm like, oh, great. I'm going to still have old ladies in my life. Because there is no handbook on this. You know, there's no handbook on life right now. Let's be real. You know, people say, "What are you doing?" I'm going, "Well, I'm in a pandemic." So, but there is no handbook. Nobody taught our generation how to age, just as I'm convinced they didn't teach our parents' generation either.
No.
You know, there is no handbook on aging and aging well. But the women in the book have decided how to do that. So,
yeah, that is really amazing. My grandmother passed last summer, and she was 95. And up until a few months before she died, because she actually was just shopping and broke her hip. It was just, she got too old and it broke. But up until that point, I mean, she played shuffleboard every day.
Awesome.
She played cards 3 to 4 times a week. And, you know, everybody where she lived in Florida, you know, within 2 weeks of her being there, everybody knew her.
Awesome.
So I mean, to me, that's the way to live, is to just totally embrace life, you know, have relationships with people, and just stay active and enjoy your life. And when you have examples like that to look up to, it makes you feel a little bit better about aging.
I think so, but I think we also have to realize that, you know, for example, I live in what I call an attitude of gratitude all of the time. We have to look for those positive things, but that's not always easy. You know, especially now, I'm surrounded by people who are really struggling with, you know, the inability to control their life. Well, let's be real, we don't ever control our lives. Life happens, and we have to roll with it, as you know so very, very well. So I think having a perspective of gratitude, of realizing you're not in control, that you can only control certain aspects of your life. And the other thing is, sometimes it's okay to have a pity party. Sometimes it is just horrible. You know, a lot of things go wrong. And what I always say is, you can have your pity party, but set a timer.
Good idea. I love that. Set a timer for the pity party.
Set a timer for the pity party. And don't think you can, you know, I always, you know, I sound like some sage on the stage, and that's so not true, but I think that, you know, life is a risk. There have been a lot of people who said, you know, oh, don't release the book now. You know, you can't do book signings. You can't do certain things. And all of that's true. For me, I released the book. You know, will it become a major motion picture or an amazing Netflix series? Absolutely.
Yes.
And if it doesn't, it won't. You know, I think you have to put the things out there that you want. I expect it to be a great motion picture or Netflix series. But if it doesn't, I can hold my book in my hand. I can say I did it. And I get wonderful emails. So, you know, as your viewers and listeners read the book, please email me back and let me know what you think. I love it when a reader says, oh my God, I can't believe that just happened. I had a guy the other day, he's 70 something, 77 maybe. And he emailed me and he said, I was loving your book and all of those women. And then what the heck happened on page 210?
Oh, that's funny.
And I loved that. It was great. I think the most challenging response I got a lovely note from a 94-year-old woman, and she did a handwritten note, and it was very scratchy, as you could imagine. And she wrote, I would love to take my place at the eaves. Can you promise me a sequel in my lifetime?
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh my, I better start writing.
Yes.
So, you know,
wonderful.
pandemic, schmandemic,
Yeah.
we'll make it
Who
happen.
cares? It just is.
It just is. I mean, it's tragic. It's horrible. It's also our new reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we're not going to stop living because of it. We're just going to keep going.
But we'll be smart and safe, I hope.
Yes. Yes. Definitely. So what gives you the most happiness and joy in your life at this point?
Oh, I think the freedom to be me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, those roles of, you know, being a mom or a wife when I was younger, that was really easy. You know, I'm so-and-so's wife, I'm my kid's mom. I think I lived in my roles. I was the educational consultant. I always thought it was really funny. You know, I'd be giving keynote speeches to like 800 people, and people are like, oh my gosh, you know, or I'd be on the little bus from the airport and people would be reading my book on their way to the conference. And they thought I was somebody I wasn't. I mean, not that I was fake, but I was very comfortable in the role. I was Grace Sammon, educational consultant. I was Grace Sammon, keynote speaker. I was this, I was that. You know, I'm just basically me sitting here, you know, in my pajama bottoms with a really nice top. And there's no more pretense, you know, and I don't surround myself with people where I would have to have pretense. So I think that's the greatest joy of being older at this age. There are certainly constraints. You know, I play pickleball and I play tennis, and it's not easy to recover some days. You know, I used to be able to walk 2 miles and then go play an hour and a half of tennis, and I don't do that because my joints hurt. The other great joy, really, I have to say, is having these amazing adult children that do amazing things. My son-in-law just got diagnosed with a very aggressive cancer. And my daughter and grandchildren and he are in New Mexico. And they don't want anybody from Florida there, understandably. I live in the pandemic center of the world right now. But my son and daughter-in-law are amazing and have portable jobs. And they've just relocated and gone live in New Mexico for 3 months. So seeing that you're going to have a legacy like that, that the joy of something I did worked, and these two amazing people are going to carry on. There's a chapter in my book called Reach, and the old women are grappling with what reach they will have into the future. They're very good at reaching back and talking about their parents and their families and their grandparents, but they really grapple with, will they have a reach into the future? And it's this wonderful 15-year-old girl in the book that says, are you kidding? Look at all the places you're already impacting the future. So I think it's that idea too, that, you know, I will impact the future somehow. So that's a great joy. And then I would just be remiss if I don't go back to the fact that I married the best man. And the thing about that that's funny is he and I are totally different. I always tell him, you are the last person on the planet I should have married. We are different politically. We are different in a million ways. And we knew each other professionally. I think I met him in 1991. We didn't get married till 2014. Yeah, 2014. 2012. Not good if I forget that, right? So I've known him forever. He was a good business friend. but I always thought he's the last person on earth I should marry. And I have to tell you, when I put my head down on the pillow at night, it's just where I'm supposed to be for as long as that bubble works. You know, we at our ages too, we realize how many friends have, growing health concerns or have lost spouses or partners or children. So being grateful for the bubble.
That is very interesting. So you don't align on political issues, on anything. So there's got to be some, is it just your work, which you no longer do, that aligns you? But how does that work?
I wish I knew. I don't know the answer to that. He gets me. You know that when you get that person. Sometimes he is a person who loves me unconditionally. We don't get a lot of that in our lives. At the same time, we love going to theater. We love we love nature. I'm really lucky to live on a large lake here in Florida. And, we can get excited when the sandhill cranes walk by. So there's a lot of that. We tend to like the same friends, which is interesting. Excuse me. So it just magically works. He's also really easy. If you read The Eves, Roy Gillis is my husband. He's an easygoing guy. Everybody likes him. He's talented. He plays music. So
yeah, you have some things that you both enjoy. So then it works.
It does.
So
love doing road trips. Love doing road trips with him. He's just fun to travel with.
Oh, that is great.
That's if anybody could ever travel again.
Yeah. I hope we're traveling again soon. I'm going a little stir crazy staying in the same place all the time. So.
But you've got a great background. It looks like, you're out there in Hawaii.
That's where I want to be, at the beach.
Awesome.
So tell me about publishing your own book.
Well, this is my 4th book. So I've started 4 companies and I've written 4 books. This is my first novel, and it's very, very different experience. When I wrote my first book, I sent it out to 14 publishing houses, and I got 11 requests to publish it. That's unprecedented.
Yeah.
I went with Corwin Press, which was a great press. They had a speaker series. I got the best royalties, and I published 2 books with them. In the world of novels, I would have assumed it was much easier, because in the world of educational consulting, your book has to be juried. You send in your book, they send it out to 15 superintendents and university professors, and they decide whether it has merit and whether it has good research in it. I'm thinking a novel's got to be easy. In the world of novels, you have a 1% chance of getting an agent and a 10% chance of getting your book published after that. So very, very grim statistics, if you will. So but I was going to play the game. I sent it out to tons of publishing houses. And the amazing thing about that is I grew up in a generation where we were taught to be very polite. Each of the agents in the publishing houses will just tell you, do not expect even an answer from me that I got your book. Sometimes they will even tell you, like, I will judge your book on the first 3 pages. Well, I have to tell you, I think the opening line of a book is important. I don't think the Eves takes off necessarily in those first 3 pages. So I was very, very unsuccessful with getting the book published that way. And all of us in the Sammon family are authors of one kind or another. My brother Bob is an amazing songwriter. My brother Rick has published 30, 40 books, I don't know. And he told me about a great house called Writing Nights, and a great guy who runs that company. And Chad worked with me to develop the Eves, and we decided to become an independent publisher. That was a big step for me, because when I think of a self-publisher, I think you couldn't get it published anywhere else. so you published it yourself.
Mhm.
What I began to think about is there are independent films. Nobody tells independent filmmakers MGM didn't pick you up, right?
Right.
And that was a big shift for me, that the work that I did could still be very, very credible, because that was important to me. There are a lot of people, there are a range of indie publishers and indie authors. And, you know, some of them really did sit down this morning and write a book and put it up on Kindle.
Mhm.
But for me, it was really important to still be credible. So, you know, I had a 60-person beta group that read the book and critiqued the book.
Mhm.
And then I had to find a house that I thought was really credible, which was the Writing Knights house.
Mhm.
What's interesting now is all of the back of the house stuff that I've had to learn. And even though I say, and the characters talk about it all the time about, you know, they shouldn't be done or they feel they're done. There are times I want to be done. It is hard to find a Facebook post every morning. I don't want to learn Instagram and Twitter and Pinterest and the back of the house stuff that you have to learn, whether you're on Barnes & Noble, as the Eves is on Barnes & Noble, and on Amazon. There's a whole back page of Amazon that authors have to manage. That's a whole nother level of publishing that has been frustrating and challenging. I like that I'm continuing to learn. I do love to learn,
Mhm.
but I'm also used to this kind of more retired pace
Yeah.
of not having deadlines. So when I'm putting together press kits and I'm running to the post office, part of that feels great. It's like, oh, I'm back in my Grace Sammon role. And part of it is, oh, I'm not hanging with my girlfriends.
Yes.
So it's different.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And I apologize for those little beeps that keep coming in. I thought I had turned off every Facebook notification, but I probably shouldn't have posted that I was excited to be interviewed by this morning, because I keep getting these Facebook notices that say, have a great time with Kimberly. And I am.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm thinking, I know as I've gotten older, I hire people for more and more things. You know, there's some things I'm going to do myself, but there's some things it's like, no, I'd rather be doing something else. So why am I doing this? And it's worth it to hire someone.
And, you know, again, that's a point of privilege, right? We have the luxury of being able to, what my girlfriend calls, throw money at things. You know, I can't be in New Mexico with my daughter, but she needed a new refrigerator. So I could throw money at that and make her life easier for that.
Exactly.
And I have to be really aware that that's just something, you know, yes, the harder I work, the luckier I got. But also, you know, my parents made sure I had an education. And that gave me a certain advantage to be able to do things that some other people would not be able to do. And I have 2 publicists, and I would love to find a way for them to do some of the things I'm doing, because I do want to write that sequel. I want to be able to write the sequel to The Eves. I have another book brewing in my head. That I want to do, because I love the research, because everybody, and that's something I think when you talk about, you know, creating this incredible life, I think we have to think about what is that juice that gets you going. And it takes a while to find that out. My friend who made the quilt, when she's making quilts, she is in the zone. She can quilt for 6 hours straight. And when I'm writing, I'm just in that zone when it's going right. Certainly there's horrible things called writer's block, as you know, but if we could each find what makes us in that zone, and sometimes that's hanging with your friends, and sometimes it's painting. I know you're also a painter.
Yeah.
What are those things that give us that juice? But we only know that if we pay attention.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think that's so important because we get so much joy from the small things like that. So I know personally, I like the process of things. So I like to learn new things, but it's not necessarily the achievement of mastering it, although that's what I always go for. It's the process. It's the process of learning and trying and changing and just being in that space. And so I think people need to find that place, the part, the part of life that just makes them feel good, because we need more of those things. Because like you said, as you get older, we don't have control over things that are going to happen. Things are going to happen to our bodies. Things are going, to our minds even, and we don't have control over that. So the more moments of joy or experiences we can have, the more fulfillment you're going to feel.
Well, you talk about regrets in your book and the research around regrets. And I don't want to leave this life, whenever that is, with regrets. So whether that means I need to apologize to someone or just come to peace with myself around that, I can honestly say that I don't have any regrets. And I really mean that. Yes, my first marriage failed. Would it have been better if it had succeeded? I don't know. I certainly wouldn't be as happy now. Someone told me many, many years ago, and this is a saying that has stayed with me: try to turn your scars into stars.
Wow, I love that. Scars into stars.
Scars into stars, because we are who we are because of the bad things as well as the good things. I talked a little earlier about sexual abuse. Well, I didn't have a voice for that when I was growing up. Nobody wanted to hear about that when I was growing up. So that made me, and I didn't realize it, but that made me a huge advocate for people who didn't have a voice. So in my work with inner city schools, where teachers and kids were frequently marginalized, I felt that I could help them find their voice through a different educational system. One of the things I've found really powerful in my life is to be able to volunteer. And the two most powerful volunteering pieces for me was my work with hospice and my work with abused kids. And it was helping them find their voice. So I think that's so important. It goes back to finding that juice, but for me, it's that scars to stars moment. I wouldn't have been as good an educational consultant. I wouldn't have been as good a child advocate, a guardian ad litem, we call them here in Florida. I wouldn't have been as good a child advocate if I hadn't had those experiences. So trying to be reflective, you talked about that, of being reflective on the journey. I'm a big one for being criticized, and rightly so, for being at the end point. I launched the book, Let's Make an Emotion Picture. We're driving cross country. We should be there by now. And I think that for me, that's a big part of my continued learning. I need to enjoy the journey. And part of the help on doing that was my husband and I did drive cross country 2 years ago, and it was scheduled stops and it was unscheduled stops. And that was a big learning experience, both in terms of traveling, being in a car for all that time. But, can we go off schedule? Is it okay? Do we need a schedule? So what you said there about the journey, I think, is really critical for all of us to learn.
Right. And I think that's on my bucket list one day when I'm not doing so much work is I would like to be able to do that. Just drive. And when you want to stop, see what's in that local area, enjoy it, smell the flowers. And okay, we've seen this. Let's drive some more. You have a point where you're going to go. For a lot of people, you want to go across the country or whatever.
Right.
But I think having that luxury, first of all, being retired to do that is awesome. But if you think about it, people like me who are still going into the office, we don't get to get up and decide, okay, I'm going to do something else today. We get up and we're rushing in the morning. We're going to work. So that type of experience is very attractive to me.
And it's great. And when you take the time to do it, I can suggest great places and such out of the way places. Clovis, New Mexico. Who knew that was a little jewel of a place? But I think that it's the appreciation. It's something I'm thinking of doing on my website and on my Facebook page, of posing like a challenge of what is the beauty that you saw today, or what is the thing that you learned today? Because whether you're driving to your office after we're done here today, there's going to be something, if your eyes are open, that you're going to be able to see. Something new, something different, something that brings you joy. So you may not have the leisure right now of driving cross country, but you're going to drive to your office, and there's going to be something that you're going to learn, something that you didn't know about, something that you're going to want to look up later. I saw this fruit the other day called a jackfruit. Have you ever seen one?
They're huge. Yes.
They're huge. I've never seen one. I took a picture of it. I'm going to post it on my Facebook page. The grocer came over and he goes, "Do you want that?" And I said, "I have no idea what that is." And he explained to me it's a jackfruit. He said it was $1.60 a pound. I weighed it. It was 17 pounds. But he told me that if you break it open, the fleshy part tastes like pork. And then there's like these little sweet little oranges in it. Many people, you knew about jackfruit. I didn't. But today you're going to find some version of your jackfruit.
Yes, thank you. I will. Yes.
I predict it.
I actually have a lovely ride because I drive over the Lake Lanier where I live 3 times on the way to work. So I love my drive to work, which is wonderful.
That's great.
I always like that. Some people have a lot of traffic to go through and things like that. So yeah, it's been wonderful. Any other aha moments in your life that you'd like to share?
Enjoy the moment. Stay in the moment. Families are funny places. We didn't talk a lot about that. And that's a thing I talk about a lot in the book. Families are just funny places, and at this time, there's different stresses on all different families for different reasons. So stay in the moment, appreciate, because that's what I'm telling myself every day.
That is wonderful. So how can people find you, find your book?
Thanks for asking. You can find my book, Eves. The subtitle over here is when our stories are told, everything changes. And I believe that is true of each of us. So we need to tell our stories. You can find me at gracesammon.net. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram. I have 2 Facebook pages. One is my professional page. It's Grace Sammon, and then the word writes, like WRITES, because Grace Sammon does indeed write. And then it's Grace Sammon. Email me. I'd love to hear from you.
Beautiful. Thank you.
And if you read the book, post an Amazon or a Barnes & Noble review.
Yes, definitely. The reviews are very important. So one last question before we get off, and I just thank you so much for being on the podcast today. But what do you think makes the most incredible, amazing life?
Oh, that's not a short answer. Balance. And that's not something I've always been good at. I've either been the workaholic or the slug. Balance, making sure that you have the right amount of challenge in your life, joy in your life, the right friends in your life. Balance. That's my short answer.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Kimberly, it was a pleasure.
Yep. And we'll talk to you again soon.
Take care. Have a great day.